we'll just leave it at that. All right, let's jump into Ezekiel. So I am really excited to preach this. Again, it's not a fun passage. I don't know if you guys have been following along. We're in chapters 6 through 11 now, but it's very intense, and we get to learn more about who God is and hopefully more about what our faith looks like in Him. I want to start out, though, by asking you a question. Have you ever had a project, something that you needed to be done, and once you started it, you realized, oh, this is going to take a whole lot longer than I thought, right? Or there's something's broken, and you're like, oh, great, I know what the fix is. I'll just do, like this is going to take, this is way broken. For me, about 4 years ago, I went to the doctor, and I don't normally go to the doctor because doctors always tell you bad news. That's probably because I never go to the doctor, and so when I'm going, there's bad news to be heard. But I had this pain in my foot, and like every step, and I kind of walked with a little limp, and I just could not walk because there was like right underneath my ankle, it just hurt, and it's kind of like, well, it's not going away. I do some research, online, and yeah, there's this tendon that runs down your leg, kind of goes down through the ankle into the foot. And it felt like, well, that's probably like tendonitis, like an overuse of a tendon, and it's just inflamed. And if tendonitis is just stay off it, and like give it rest. And I'm like, well, it's kind of my foot, like I don't know if I can do that. But I went to the doctor just to make sure, and the doctor says, well, let's get x-rays. I go, no, it's my tendon. X-rays are for bones. You aren't even going to be able to see the muscle. That's what's hurting. I've kind of pinpointed it. I'm like showing him like, no, I don't think you understood. It's right here. He's like, well, let's go ahead and take some x-rays. All right, fine. I take x-rays, then you got to come back, right, to have them read it. And the guy's like, foot specialist, like your foot's in terrible shape. It's like misshapen, and it's true. I did kind of have like 3 balls in my ankle instead of like 1, like where it's supposed to be. And that was ever since in high school, I rolled my ankle. And so it was fine. It healed up. I just wore, like big old ankle braces, like whenever I was playing sports, and it was fine. But apparently, it didn't heal all the way. It didn't heal properly, and over time, with weight, my foot had become deformed, and so now I couldn't walk normal. Like I could have no relief for that poor tendon that got squeezed every single step that I take. And so the answer was, you need a new foot, and you're like, wait, what? And well, don't worry, I'll just break your foot and then put it back together in the right way so that then you'll be able to walk normally. And you're kind of like, are we sure? But at the same time, I walk out of there and it hurts, and so you're like, man, okay. And, like a month and a half later, I'm in this 4-hour surgery. They make 8 incisions all over my foot. It's a mess. It was way, I think they slow played it to me. They didn't want to tell me how much they were going to do. They're like, yeah, we'll just do a little foot surgery. You're like, all right. And then there's this huge long process. I'm in a boot for forever. And then it really hurt, all that rehab process. But today, hey, I don't walk with a limp. And it worked. But holy cow, was that more intensive than I was expecting. I was thinking here, we'll give you a boot for 4 weeks and just try to ice it at night. It's like, yeah, I could do that. But no, we're talking we're going to have a whole year-long rehab process, and we're going to completely destroy your foot and put it back together. That is kind of what needs to happen with the temple, right? So we're going through Ezekiel. We're calling it This Old Temple. And the sermon series is all about how the temple is God's dwelling place with His people, and there are problems. We're going to look more specifically at these problems, but as we'll see, when you look at the problems, you realize, oh, this goes really deep. This isn't going to be a quick Saturday afternoon, just clean up the temple here and we'll be good. There's some more invasive measures that are needed. So we're going to be reading through, I wish I could preach through everything. We're going to primarily be in chapter 8. This week we're going to read all of 8, and then we're going to end in chapter 11. But I want us to listen about what are those problems that we see in the temple, and then what are those solutions, because it's a whole lot more intense than maybe Ezekiel first thought, or maybe we even think when we read it. All right, you guys ready? Open your Bibles, or it'll be up on the screen, so you don't even need to. Praise God, He's sustaining me. All right, Ezekiel 8, 1 through 18. I'm going to read it and then kind of stop and make comments as we go, so don't worry, it's planned. In the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th day, while I was sitting in my house and the elders of Judah were sitting before me, the hand of the sovereign Lord came on me there. I looked and I saw a figure like that of a man. From what appeared to be his waist down, he was like fire, and from there up, his appearance was as bright as glowing metal. He stretched out what looked like a hand and took me by the hair of my head. A spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven, and in visions of God, he took me to Jerusalem, to the entrance of the north gate of the inner court, where the idol that provokes jealousy stood. And there before me was the glory of the God of Israel, as in the vision I had seen in the plain. A lot of references here back to chapter 1. So remember in chapter 1, he sees this great, glorious vision of God in Babylon. He was a part of the group that was first exiled. Babylon had taken over the kingdom of Judah, the city of Jerusalem, and they had exiled the cream of the crop. The rulers, the nobility, the king, the priest. He was one of the priests that went. So he's in Babylon. God's glory comes to him in chapter 1, and now comes to him a second time here in chapter 8. And then, miraculously, by the Spirit, Ezekiel is taken back to Jerusalem. What Ezekiel has been prophesying against is the spiritual state of Jerusalem centered around the temple. And now God's going to show him, well, this is why what you've been prophesying is what you've been prophesying. And so he shows up there. Then he said to me, Son of man, look toward the north. So I looked, and in the entrance, north of the gate of the altar, I saw this idol of jealousy. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The utterly detestable things the Israelites are doing here, things that will drive me far from my sanctuary. But you will see things that are even more detestable. So what you have, we're going now to the temple, the place where God dwells, the place that is set apart from the entire nation, where God will be worshiped. And that's where he will dwell. And the first thing Ezekiel sees is an idol guarding the entrance to the inner court. Oh, why does God need an idol guarding the was this misplaced? It's like, was it one of the invaders that dropped it off, right? Like, we need to clean this up. This can't be. This doesn't belong here in the temple. God says, hold on, Ezekiel, it gets a lot worse. Keeps going. Then he brought me to the entrance of the court. I looked and I saw a hole in the wall. He said to me, Son of man, now dig into the wall. So I dug into the wall and saw a doorway there. And he said to me, Go in and see the wicked and detestable things they are doing here. So I went in and looked. And I saw portrayed all over the walls all kinds of crawling things and unclean animals and all the idols of Israel. In front of them stood 70 elders of Israel. And Jahaziah, son of Shaphan, was standing among them. Each had a censer in his hand, and a fragrant cloud of incense was rising. And so now God is saying, go inside. Go inside one of these rooms, probably used for storage of furniture, utensils, or clothing that the priest would wear. He goes in there, and on the walls, he sees depicted all of these unclean animals, but they represent these gods. These foreign gods, these demons, idols that other people worship, but not Yahweh. And can you imagine? He's a priest, or Ezekiel was a priest. We talked about that. And then he kind of gets formally initiated while he's in Babylon. And can you believe it? Those invaders have broken in and drawn graffiti all over the walls of the temple. We're going to need to wash this all the way clean. But then you look, well, the elders are already there. Surely they're cleaning this up. They can't tolerate it, right? The elders are the people that took the leadership role after all the leadership left. Now there's 70 of them that are there, and they're the ones who are going to direct Israel, house of Israel, currently the nation of Judah. But what are they doing? They don't seem to care. In fact, they're at every single one of these offering incense to them. Like, oh no. Like, they're actually worshiping other gods. This wasn't a mistake. They drew these on here. God's people drew them in God's temple in order to worship them. God says, hey, hold on, it's going to get worse. Yikes, yikes, yikes. Then he brought me to the entrance of the north gate of the house of the Lord, and I saw women sitting there mourning the god Tammuz. He said to me, do you see this, son of man? You will see things that are even more detestable than this. It's not just the leadership that's corrupted, not just the men, the women as well. Well, the proper response to what's going on here in the temple would be mourning, heartbroken. This is terrible. What do we do, right? And sure enough, the women are out there mourning. No, not God, right? Not Yahweh, their God. They're mourning this foreign god, Tammuz, that they don't even know. There's no history with Tammuz, even in the Bible. It's just one that they picked, and they said, you know what we need to do? We need to mourn this God. I don't know, are things bad in the city? Well, let's turn to Tammuz. It's like, oh my goodness. And so finally, God's like, this is all happening in the courtyard. Let's go to the entrance of the temple, and surely, Ezekiel, there's going to be people worshiping there. He wasn't wrong. He then brought me into the inner court of the house of the Lord, and there at the entrance to the temple, between the portico and the altar, were about 25 men. There we go, the righteous ones. With their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, they were bowing down to the sun in the east. Are you kidding me? You walk all the way into the temple in order to worship somewhere else, in order to turn your back on the temple. You don't even stay in your homes to do this, right? You don't even stay outside. It's like, I'm going to intentionally, like, I don't know, throw up the middle finger to God. I could care less about you and watch this. I'm going to walk all the way to your steps, turn around, and bow down to the sun that you created. It's like, holy cow. Oh, this is bad. Like this is really bad, right? Like, imagine this. This is how I imagine God would feel. If you had an acquaintance who had just taken over a restaurant, and they said, grand opening, I'd love for you to be there. I'll pay for your meal. You say, great, sounds good. Find a babysitter, get all done up. You show up there, you walk through the door, and I have to act this out, and I'm feeling good. Praise God. Man, you guys don't know. I couldn't even sit up here. Like, you guys are probably like, where's Brad at? I was like hiding from us. All right, you walk in, and you're like stepping over these construction, pieces of drywall here, and there's like pipes and stuff. Like, wow, okay, it's new, maybe they just haven't quite cleaned up yet. You go to the hostess there. She's just on her phone, like playing games or something. You're like, hi, could we get a table? Oh yeah, over there. And you go, and every single table is full of dirty dishes. Someone's already eaten here. Yeah, just sit wherever you want, right? All right, I mean, some of us would leave. But let's say you didn't, and you sit down, and now you're waiting, and the service is terrible. When they finally come, they ask your order, they bring your food, it's trash. Like, you can see mold on it. Like, it's not food. It's like, at that point, you're saying, hold on, where's the prank camera? This is a joke, right? Like someone has done me up on this in order to get my response here. Because no one would invite me as a guest of honor and then intentionally insult me and intentionally put crap in front of me. Ooh, I can't say that. Trash in front of me. I'm sorry. But if you felt that, you would leave. You would leave. Well, and then what if your acquaintance comes in and acts like nothing's wrong, right? You're like, dude, what's up? Is it like, haha, you got us. They're like, oh yeah, did you like the food? Yeah, I'm so proud of this place. Thanks for coming. And you're just like, are you clueless? Like let it go. Like the joke's over. Like I get it. Haha. It's like you would leave, and then you probably would not go back to anything they invite you to, right? I mean, if they show that this was normal, and they're completely clueless. Like, they don't understand the level of affront that they have caused you. Like, that's what God's feeling. But like, what if you're the owner, right? Like, what if that's your restaurant? You took it over, and this is the grand opening, and you're coming in to check in on it, and the same experience happens. You're saying, all right, where's the managers? You're fired, out. We're closed. We got to redo this, right? It's like, it's not just take the food back and make it better. It's like, no. We're done. You're done. It's like, or you quit. You say, I'm selling this place, right? Like, there's no, like, I'm not coming. Like, you've got to be kidding me. If this was what the acceptable standard was that people were comfortable with, no, I'm not there. And that's what we see God doing, right? Where he says, hey, look, we're not just going to fix some things here. We need new personnel. He doesn't give up on them. He doesn't say, I will no longer be their God. I'm selling the restaurant. But he says, this whole thing, we're gutting it. It's got to be replaced. And so then you see in chapter 9 and chapter 10, the beginning of chapter 11, these visions of judgment where it's, essentially firing people, but he calls it killing them. And it's brutal, and God is demonstrating that kind of what we were looking at last week. Don't take advantage of God. It's playing Russian roulette with God or trying to bluff God. That's a deadly game to play, because he cares and he's deeply affronted by this. And there's work to be done. But then at the end of chapter 11, I want to read the last section to you guys as well. It shows that God is not quitting the job. He is still committed to running the restaurant. He just needs to fix it. And here's what that means to him. This is 11, verses 17 through 25. Therefore say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I will gather you from the nations and bring you back from the countries where you have been scattered, and I will give you back the land of Israel again. They will return to it and remove all its vile images and detestable idols. I will give them an undivided heart and put a new spirit in them. I will remove from them their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. Then they will follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. They will be my people, and I will be their God. But as for those whose hearts are devoted to their vile images and detestable idols, I will bring down on their own heads what they have done, declares the sovereign Lord. Then the cherubim, with the wheels beside them, spread their wings, and the glory of the God of Israel was above them. The glory of the Lord went up from within the city and stopped above the mountain east of it. The Spirit lifted me up and brought me to the exiles in Babylonia in the vision given by the Spirit of God. Then the vision I had seen went up from me, and I told the exiles everything the Lord had shown me. It's a dramatic conclusion. So God has a plan for how he's going to fix this. Yeah, we'll clean up the temple, but the problem never was the temple. The problem's in the people's hearts. We got to give them a new heart. It's like we can't fix the temple and then keep the people. We're going to need to fix the people, and he's got a plan for how to do it. And then dramatic closing. So throughout this whole 4-chapter segment, we see the glory of God, which dwells in the most holy place at the center of the temple, gets up. Like God's going to do something. And then it moves out. And it moves a little further out. And then finally it goes up over the hills where it's completely out of the temple, completely out of the city, off onto the horizon. The mountains are as far as you can see if you look east, symbolizing that God says, that's it. I'm out. Until we can fix it. We're done. It's broken, and now let's get to work. And that's kind of what he says in Ezekiel. At least that's what that passage says, right? So again, what do we see? That's what it says, and that's ominous. There was a part I didn't even mention last week in 14 at the end. I told some of you this. He says, when you see the exiles that survive, not the ones that were saved, but the ones that survive, he's like, you'll feel comforted at the level of destruction that God had brought. Why? Because they're so bad. Like you're like, oh, good. Like you're not, you haven't lost it, God. Like you're totally right. We need new people, and so you got to shake the people up, and that's where he's going. But I think there's 3 things we can take from this passage to really help us understand. I don't think we're in that same situation, but I think there's a lot of warnings because, like we said at the beginning, it's the same God, right? So we can know how things influence him, affect him, and how we can sustain a strong relationship with him. That's what we can learn. First, why did God leave? Why did his presence leave the temple? There's this symbolic, like, all right, that's it. Like, we're broken up. We're taking a break. Why? It's the idolatry, right? I mean, look at the temple, right? We just saw, incredible disrespect for God. Oh, and I didn't even read the end of 8. I'm about to read it now. Because alongside the idols that he sees in the temple, there's another parallel action that renders them guilty. Now, you guys, we didn't read it, but you guys would have had to have read it. Oh, I got slides for this. Had to read it if you're going along with us in our reading plan. But 4 times in this section, he says something very similar to this about violence and social injustice. He's prepare chains, for the land is full of bloodshed, and the city is full of violence. That's 7:23 and 8:17. He said to me, have you seen this, Son of Man? Is it a trivial matter for the people of Judah to do the detestable things they are doing here? Must they also fill the land with violence and continually arouse my anger? Look at them, putting the branch to their nose. And then in 9:9, he answered me, the sin of the people of Israel and Judah is exceedingly great, and the land is full of bloodshed, and the city is full of injustice. They say, the Lord has forsaken the land, the Lord does not see. And then in 11, you have killed many people in this city and filled the streets with the dead. This is a common theme, not just to Ezekiel, but to all the Old Testament. The people were worshiping other gods. They had strayed away from following Yahweh, the God who had made a covenant with them, who had married them, and they've decided to go their own path. And they were acting incredibly unjust to their fellow peers. They were taking advantage of them and using them almost as resources to see what they could gain from it. Like even in chapter 11 at the very beginning, you have these other elders that are like, oh, look at us. We're so rich because they had stolen the property of all the exiles who had left. Like they're just looking to make a quick buck over this whole ordeal. And they're secure in that. They're prideful in that. And he's saying, no, that's an example of a rotten heart. And here's the thing. What we can see from the Bible is that worship and ethics, doing right and wrong, are not disconnected. They're very much together. Our worship shapes our ethics. Who we are, how we interact with good and evil in the world, how we choose to be righteous is related to who we choose to worship. Because God is the ultimate value of good. He's the ultimate one who can keep us on the straight and narrow path. If we disconnect from God, well, now all of a sudden we're wandering. You know, it's like using GPS. I don't like using GPS because I'd rather have it in my head. But there are times where I go somewhere for the very first time and I need to follow a GPS. Like for one of Quentin's soccer games, we go to a field we've never been to before. We got the GPS up. What happens if halfway through the battery dies? Do I get there? No, I kind of aimlessly wander around some city I've never been in before, some part of town I don't know, and hopefully maybe I'll land at the place I want to be. It's the same thing. If we want to live good lives, if we want to be righteous, if we want to experience the blessings of God, the way that He has designed life to work, we can't go on our own. We'll just be wandering around aimlessly, hoping. I mean, we might have very good intentions, like, I think it's somewhere over there, and we're just wiggling back and forth. But if we remain connected to the source, our compass, our GPS, well, now we can get there. And it's our worship that shapes our ethics in life. We have to choose to worship. So the question is, who do you worship? Or do you worship? Right? Like how we talked about this in that worship series. Worship isn't just singing songs, right? It's not just believing in a certain thing. It's actually intentionally getting before God, marveling at Him, and just seeing Him in His beauty and praising Him for it. It's wanting to know Him, wanting to listen to Him. It's telling Him who He is, but it's an active process. It's a heart posture we talked about, right? It's intimacy with God. And come on, guys, like, you can go wherever you want with this, but our nation has a worship problem. I mean, we're very much aware of an ethics problem. Our news will say that, right? You say, like, what do we do? We completely disregard human life. Fill in the blank, right? Whether it's the tragedy from abortion, whether it's the tragedy of people shooting other people. Like there are several shootings over this weekend. Like, we demonstrate ethics in our country that reflect Israel in this passage. The problem isn't we just have to do better. Well, and here's something. It's not that the laws have to be better, right? I mean, it's not gun control. It's not Roe v. Wade. It's our hearts, people. It's a worship problem. We're not submitting to God. And now we are God's people, so let's lead the way. We have to be humble before God and worship Him. Pray to Him, listen to Him, gaze at His beauty, not gaze at television shows, right? Or hobbies or family or politics, or you fill in the blank, whatever it is that consumes your time and gives you a centering balance in your life. That job is God's alone. And if you're wondering, how come my life isn't quite on the straight and narrow, I would say just look at your heart. Who are you worshiping? Or are you worshiping? Because I think maybe more so than other gods, I'll go alone. I probably know it. I've done that with my wife. Now I think I know how to get there. We're like, hey, you better look it up, hon. It's like the third time I've seen this sign, That happens. Why? Because we're not connected to the source. Let us be connected in worship to God. He's our source. All right, that's one. Second point that we can see, being religious won't fix our hearts. These people were religious. So religious. You get that, right? They were worshiping all sorts of gods, bowing down, offering incense. Like they were exerting effort. Now, here's the thing that I think is common to hear in our culture, is that people say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, right? Like I have some belief in God, or maybe not God, some supreme being or some supernatural reality, but it's vague. It's not specific. It's not an actual person, an actual God. It's not any one of the religions. I don't practice it. I just kind of center myself and balance on some supernatural reality that's out there. And I think some people expect Christians to say, well, that's good, right? Like you're trying, you're seeking truth, you'll eventually find it. God is saying, no. I don't care about how much effort you're putting into this. I'm caring about your heart and having a relationship with me. Like vague spirituality, God knows nothing of. God is intimate and loving. You can't have a vague relationship. He's going to be close to us. And so all we have to offer the world is to know this God who created heavens and the earth, who also loves us and wants to know us. That's what we offer. On the flip side, if you're looking to be close to God, you want this presence. You don't want him going up over the mountains to our west. You want him to dwell within us. The New Testament, we'll get there, talks about how he dwells in our hearts. I want that. Well, guess what? It's not going to come from doing more church, right? From singing louder, from going to more Bible studies or giving more money. No. Our religious effort isn't the solution. What's the solution? I will give them an undivided heart and put a new spirit in them. I will remove from them their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. Then they will follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. They will be my people, and I will be their God. That's the solution. So I reckon it like this. If you want God's presence, you're feeling distant from him, you don't have it, view yourself as the one getting the heart transplant, right? Or the ankle surgery, whatever it is. And you've got to say, okay, I don't know what you're talking about here. This sounds intense, but I'll lay down on this surgery table. I'll let you do your anesthesia and give me a new heart. That's what it looks like, waiting on the Lord. It's still worshiping him. It's making sure that we're humble before him and submitting to him. And then it's on God to provide the heart. We don't generate the heart. We can't rely on our own efforts and our own measures to bring God back. And that brings me to the last point. Because how can we be talking about being made righteous before God, having a new heart, without talking about Jesus? Jesus is our mark. What I'm referring to is in chapter 9. We didn't read it because that would spoil the surprise. But it says this in chapter 9. This is a vision of God bringing judgment on his people. There's the divine angels that are tasked with this. There's one in particular that has a writing kit. And it says, then the Lord called to the man with the writing kit, clothed in linen, and had the writing kit at his side. And he said to him, go throughout the city of Jerusalem and put a mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over all the detestable things that are done in it. So as I listened, he said to the others, follow him through the city and kill, without showing pity or compassion, slaughter the old men, the young men, and women, the mothers and children, but do not touch anyone who has the mark. I want to be the person with the mark, right? Like you read this and you're like, okay, can I do it, right? Well, here's the thing. This has so many overtones to the first Passover, right? When God said, put the blood of the lamb on your doorpost, and when I see it, I will pass over you, and you will not experience my judgment. This has overtones of that scarlet cord of Rahab. This is in Joshua chapter 2, where the battle of Jericho happens, but they know to spare Rahab because she's been marked. And commentators love to say, it's blood because the blood of the lamb is going to be Jesus. It's a scarlet cord because the blood of the lamb, because it's Jesus. Early Christian commentators said the exact same thing about this passage. Do you want to know why? Check out how cool this is. In the Hebrew, it says, not mark. There's not a word for mark, but it's actually a letter in the alphabet. It's the very last letter, the tav. In the ancient Hebrew script, the tav is an X or a cross. When translated into Greek, the Septuagint, which would be what the early church fathers would read, that tav would have been translated to a tau, which was like a T or a cross. That's what Jesus died on. It wasn't lost on the early Christian interpreters. After they had seen everything that Jesus did, to read this passage and then say, I know what they're talking about. Like there is a mark. We are supposed to be marked, and that's how we can avoid God's judgment. That mark is Jesus by his blood. And this is why we celebrate. We say that we are only made righteous before God. We are only good enough before him, but we only dodge his judgment if we're marked by him. If he has taken our sins away and that we receive his righteousness, and that's exactly what he offered to us. Our hope, our mark is in Jesus. And because we have that, we don't have to be afraid of God's judgment. This is also our transplanted heart. It comes in Jesus. That's the fulfillment. And so now we see ourselves as we've had the surgery, right? If we've placed our faith in Jesus, we say, I will follow you, I accept your sacrifice, I accept your love for me, and I submit to you with my life. Well, now we are marked. And now we have this new heart, but it's just like coming out of surgery, there's rehab. And so now we've got to figure out, how do I use this new heart? But instead of being weaker, we find that we're stronger and stronger the more that we submit and we obey God and fall in line with him. Because no longer do we have this heart of stone that is rebellious, but we have this heart that is sensitive to God and wants to follow him in everything he does. So we don't rely on our religious efforts. We solely rely on Jesus and what he has done. That's what we can take as encouragement, and that's the hope that Ezekiel's pointing to that we now know in Jesus. Yeah, amen. All right, we got some questions here. And praise God, he's good. And he sustained me this whole time. I thought I was going to need a bucket, but the exit's right there. All right, here's some questions where you guys can talk about through this week. One is, what was your, this is so funny, I can't read the top line. What was your last project that took much longer than you thought? Icebreaker kind of question, share a funny story. But the second ones are more application. Have you seen worship shape ethics, either in yours or in others' lives? Is that true based on observation? And then lastly, what is one sign of a new heart from a heart of stone? We talk about getting this new heart. What does that look like? And then how can you see it, either in yourself or others? All right, lastly, this is the assignment for next week. We're adding 15. If you have that bookmark, if you have that bookmark, you have to add 15. It only says 16 through 24, and this is the most reading that you'll have to do during the series, so get a good head start on it. Read a chapter tonight. 15 is really short. All right, let's finish up by worshiping God together in unity because of what Jesus has done for us. We can be with him forever.